How confident would you be if instead of using a search engine, you asked your question of an AI and got one answer? We'll explore those implications of a real-world project in this episode of For Immediate Release. Another fine podcast from the FIR Podcast Network.
This is For Immediate Release, the podcast for communicators.
Welcome, everybody, to episode number 245 of For Immediate Release. I'm Shel Holtz.
And I'm Neville Hobson. In this episode, chatbots we're going to talk about. They could one day replace search engines. Why is that a terrible idea, according to the MIT Technology Review? Search, it's a thorny topic to many. The MIT Technology Review has a really interesting piece on the topic we're going to discuss today about chatbots and the role they play. And could they replace search engines? Well, it's complicated. Let's lay it out as the MIT Technology Review has it. They talk about, in their introduction, the vision of a know-it-all AI that dishes out relevant and accurate information in easy-to-understand bite-sized chunks is shaping the way tech companies are approaching the future of search. And with the rise of voice assistants like Siri and Alexa, language models are becoming a go-to technology for finding stuff out in general. Last year, Google researchers proposed that search could be reimagined as a two-way conversation between user and language model, with computers answering questions such as a human expert might. Google's also developing a technology called a multitask unified model, MUM, nicely compressed into the word MUM. That's a good one. Built on top of a language model, it's designed to respond to users' queries by pulling together information from different sources. The problem, says MIT, is that language models are mindless mimics. They can become strikingly accurate at predicting the words or phrases most likely to come next in a sentence or conversation. But despite Google CEO Sundar Pichai's casual claim that his AI understands many topics, language models do not know what they're saying and cannot reason about what their words convey. The idea of using AI to synthesize and package up responses to search queries is part of a trend that began with the use of what are known as direct answers or snippets, single answers or short excerpts shown above links to documents in search results. In theory, these can give you the information you're looking for at a glance, saving you the trouble of reading through longer documents to find it yourself. In 2020, researchers in Germany published a paper highlighting the problems with direct answers. They noted the answer to most questions is, it depends. One of our favorite two words there, Shel. This is difficult to get through to someone searching. In general, search technology should support the various ways that people use search engines today, many of which are not served by direct answers. People often use search to explore topics that they may not even have specific questions about. In this case, simply offering a list of documents would be more useful. It must be clear where information comes from, especially if an AI is drawing pieces from more than one source, says MIT. Some voice assistants already do this, prefacing an answer with, "Here's what I found on Wikipedia," for example. Future search tools should also have the ability to say, "That's a dumb question." So that's a state of play, according to the MIT's article. I think it's interesting. I like the "it depends" in particular, because that's exactly what I would think of in terms of the scenario that they're playing out. But the tech companies are developing this, and Google's at the forefront of this with MUM, and this whole notion of could this replace traditional search engines? It's a huge question. What's your take on it, Shel?
It's a thorny issue. And it does depend. I have both the Google Assistant and the Amazon Echo devices scattered through the house, and I'm asking questions all the time. And I know that it is searching something when it provides me with those answers. When I'm cooking and I'll want a conversion, how many ounces in a quart or something like that. I don't care where the information comes from, and I trust it is going to give me accurate information. Also, if I'm asking something like, how many Oscars did Cary Grant win? I don't care where it goes for the information. I am reasonably certain that it's going to give me accurate information. Most of the searching I do, though, I want to be able to look through not just different results, but different sources. I increasingly am using u.com for searches because it gives you these horizontal tiles that makes it a lot easier to compare. It also breaks them into categories, which I really like. And this is different from the idea of what this article is talking about, which is something we have actually talked about before that has been called one true answer. Now, it's a little different when you're using this for search. I mean, it's basically Star Trek, right? It's Captain Kirk or Captain Picard saying computer and asking a question and getting that one definitive answer. But I remember asking the Echo whether I should keep apples in the refrigerator, and I got one true answer. Then I asked Google, and I got a completely different one true answer because they picked different sources, and apparently this is something that there is not a lot of agreement on. So for now, I think using a regular search engine is going to give you much better information. One day, maybe, but still when there's varying opinions. And not only that, but the context that you're trying to employ in your search, I'm not sure that a chatbot, even a large AI is going to suss out exactly what it is that I'm looking for. And I could see myself getting frustrated in having a conversation about, say, for example, I want to cook this particular dish. Is baking better, or should I pan fry this, right? I don't know. I just don't think one true answer is going to satisfy that. And I remain bullish on chatbots, by the way, just not as a replacement for search.
No, it's interesting listening to what you were saying there. I think it is. I find it fascinating, the debate, this actual topic, even to just think it through. I think most of it, I certainly am, like you, I talk to my Google Assistant all the time. I'm constantly having conversations with this imaginary person who I call Jane, by the way. I call them all Jane. I got that from when I was using a TomTom back in the very early days, because that voice was called Jane. So they're all Jane to me in a car.
Is that a company that's still around, by the way?
They do. They're great in sat-navs for cars. They're really, really good. Software, not the hardware devices, but they still do those. But that's an aside, of course. But I mean, the notion of this, it depends, introduced a really different thought in my mind to this, because many things you ask, say you're asking a human, I would say well over 3/4 of the answers you get would start with, well, it depends. If you want to do X, do this Y. If you want to do B, do D first, and that'll get you to B. You can't have that. This is not that intelligent. But I think it's playing a bit as well to people's behaviors, because we're now so accustomed to this. Are we actually shortchanging ourselves with, we don't care the source? And you cited an example of two different chatbots giving two totally different truths to the same question. That's a bit worrying, because it's not like it's deliberate, but it's to do with trusting that source, is it not? So you don't want to have that thought in your mind, can I trust this? Because you'll stop using it. But the pace at which this is developing is almost steamrolling across the desire for more, I suppose, nuanced answers. We're not going to get that from the tech in its current state. Could it get there? I think this is what the big tech companies are talking about, notably Google. Maybe this is what Mumsnet's going to get to. But in the meantime, we've got this. And I think the reference to the snippets, the direct answers or snippets, is quite interesting, because those search snippets with answers are already quite prevalent. And most people, I suspect, don't know anything about the background to that, but they are drawn from multiple sources. Wikipedia plays a big role in this. If you're looking for companies, for instance, and brands, often the snippet will have a short paragraph, and that's pulled directly from a Wikipedia entry if they have one. So that, as an aside, means it's worthwhile making sure your Wikipedia entry is a good entry, if you see what I mean. So I see this being a debate that we ought to be having, particularly amongst communicators, on the it depends portion of this, because if you're relying on search to provide answers to either your customers where they can get easy answers to things that's AI driven, you want to be sure that the it depends doesn't crop up too well. Or if it does, you've got ready answers to the it depends.
Research that you're doing for an article, for example, or a speech that you're writing for your CEO, you want to make sure this is accurate, not just factually accurate, but accurate in the context of what content you're producing. Now, I know that you can also run into this talking to subject matter experts. I mean, in real life with no computer, right? You talk to one subject matter expert and ask a question, you might get a different answer if you asked a different one. So I see that as a similar conundrum, and that's what I like about getting multiple answers in a traditional search engine, is that I can pick the one, not the one that gives me the answer that I prefer, but the one that suits the context. And comes from the authoritative source that I trust for the kind of information that I'm looking for. So, and again, I think chatbots are great. I think, getting one true answer from my cell phone provider about a plan when I'm on their website and using the chatbot feature to interact with their automated agent, that's fine. I'm not worried about that. It's searching the entire internet for the information that I'm looking for and being delivered one answer. I mean, I see that as real problematic. I mean, what if somebody's able to elevate an answer to the point that the AI chooses it when it's disinformation? And the people who put disinformation out there know how to game these systems.
They do.
This will just be a new one to game.
Yeah, there's exactly that risk. And I think there's another point mentioned in the MIT's article too about the search technology should support the various ways people use search engines, many of which are not served by direct answers. And indeed, they make a point here, which I recognize this because I do this a lot. People often use search to explore topics that they may not even have specific questions about. I do that a lot, where I'm not quite sure.
Oh, I do that too.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the question is, so I'll explore it. That's real difficult to do with this way. It's actually difficult to do on a web page when you're typing, even worse on a phone with tapping, where you're not sure what the question is even. So this is not yet at a state to take on the magnitude of what is possible. It's getting there in many ways, I think, and it is part of our environment. So it's something to bear in mind. So I think the question, if you like, could chatbots one day replace search engines? Well, the answer to that obviously has got to be, it depends, right?
Well, I think there are a lot of people who are looking to employ whatever is as frictionless as possible. There are people who are going to say, I can just ask a question into my phone and get an answer. That's great. I don't have to type something and scroll through multiple answers. And they'll do it, and they'll accept the answer because they're not applying any critical thinking to it. That's worrisome. I think for the rest of us, you're absolutely right. It depends. I'll use it for things where I am confident that the answer I get is going to be fine, and I won't use it for things where there's more nuance.
Yeah, it's good enough. And I like the way in which they mentioned this in the article, but I noted a lot recently with Google Assistant in particular, where I ask it a question about something. It will say, here's what I found on, and the name of a publication or a website.
Yeah, Echo does that too.
Which is excellent, actually, because you realize, this is saying that is the authoritative source it's found the answer from. So you tend to...
And of course, sometimes the source is one I've never heard of, which is another issue altogether. I'll ask, how many calories in something, and it'll say, here's what I found on somethingorother.com. And I'll go, what? Yeah, I've never heard of that.
This is early days, and I think it's developing pretty nicely, but it definitely is, and it depends here.
It does. What doesn't depend is when the next episode of our monthly Hobson and Holtz report will be coming out. We're recording that on Sunday, so you listeners will be able to hear our hefty but good edition this coming Monday, which I believe is the 18th.
18th of April.
That's right. So looking forward to recording that with you and having a meatier conversation on Sunday.
Likewise, Sean.
And that'll be a 30 for this episode of For Immediate Release.